Hello everybody, vanburman here and welcome to my podcast. I believe we're on number 7, we would be, I think, but I've not put the numbers up on them anymore. And some of them don't even have numbers, but I think this is the 7th official one, or the one in the series of podcasts. And today, I would like to talk about, I hesitate to use the word, but indie developers, or alternative developers, or small developers, which I will be using for the duration of this video podcast thing. I don't know. Whatever it is, me talking, people listen, people turn off after this second and never listen again. That sort of stuff. But basically, what I want to talk about today is because I've had a fair bit of contact with a couple of developers regarding several games which are as of yet unreleased, and I can't name any names until what we have planned happens. But something that I've realised by talking to a lot of the developers and getting to know the ins and outs of their games, and actually, I mean, I know how much time is needed, but actually to sort of try and quantify it, and to quantify the amount of money needed to pull off something which is obviously a bit more substantial than mine, which just uses one program and just has me slowly plodding along doing it. Eventually, to actually have a paid team around doing it is a totally different ball game. And the fact that I'm getting fairly good responses regarding wanting to do certain things, such as interviews or early access gameplays, that sort of stuff, it's really quite nice to see that they're willing to engage with even someone like me who has very low subscribers, but I like to think that my content is fairly good, and if they were to come and watch it, then they would see that actually it's, the content is there and is good. I don't know, you might disagree, but one of the things that I can say about those sort of developers is that I believe that they're going to be part of the future lifeblood of, PC games especially. And I know mobile games, but quite frankly I don't really care for them. I'd much rather play it on the PC than on my mobile. As far as I'm concerned, something like Angry Birds is fine for your phone. It's your game where you're on the toilet, quite frankly. But we're getting a load of really good sort of game ideas coming out of it. For example, I've seen quite a few games in the style which I want to see more RPGs being made. Obviously, I don't just look at RPGs. I've done Interstellar Marines, of course, which hasn't got any RPG element to it at all, as of yet. Of course, it is still, I'd say it was, there's no denying, what's released at the minute is very bare bones. But obviously that will get added to as it gets bigger and more developed over time. I can't remember I don't know if they've set a release date for that. I've forgotten now anyway. But, I presume they still do have a while to do it. The great thing about RPGs is that really when you get the battle system down, especially the battle system that I want, it's not terribly difficult with that if you're developing it from scratch. It's more the time really is the story, I would say, in that sort of game. Whereas obviously with Interstellar Marines there's a lot more to it than just story, although there will be a story mode. I don't know. Shooter games, there's very, very few shooter games that do stories well. Not many at all. I would say Bulletstorm does its story very well. If you've not played that, it is really good. I've started doing a playthrough for it on my secondary channel, which you might want to check out if you feel the need. It's Odin's Mighty Alliance, which is coincidentally the name of my group on Steam, which you can join if you want to participate in multiplayer online videos that I'll do at some point. Then please do feel free to add yourself to that. What was I saying? Yeah, so you have really different demands on the time for the games, but you've got these very hard-working, dedicated small groups of developers that really, really want their games to succeed. Not all of them are great. I mean, you can have a look through Greenlight, and you can see a lot of stuff which the concept might not be too bad, but it's not gonna make it as it is. it would need a lot more. I mean, for example, the best example I can say is I was just looking through now, because obviously I'm ever searching through there for new games, especially RPGs, seeing as RPGs on the bottom tier, I would say, need the support at that point, really, just to, obviously, either they need funding to get them funded, or just to get it out there, just to show that there is actually the demand for it. And as soon as you do that, because there is a huge demand for it, you might not think it, I might not think it by the small amount of subscribers I've got, but it is true. There is a huge demand for it. There's not just me that thinks this way, which I've come to realise, actually, which I love about getting more involved with developers and different games and stuff. Oh, I've now lost where I was. Yes, I saw this really great concept for a game. I actually really like it. I think it's very, very clever. What they've done is they've used RPG Maker to make a zombie survival game. Which, I mean, anything using RPG Maker, no matter who you are, unless you're one of the very talented people who can use the scripts and all the extra stuff on there, which I can't obviously make my own scripts. It takes a lot of time and effort to do this sort of thing, but from the screenshots that I saw, and the fact that I'm a bit concerned that they've spent the 60 quid to get it on Steam, was it 75? One of the two. That it's got the bare bones there to be a very decent idea, and there's a lot of people who have been criticising it. Now, and obviously, whenever an RPG Maker game goes up, you get people criticising it because they think, oh, they've just used that one program to make it, which is true, and it takes no effort, no skill, and obviously that can be further from the truth. But that's a totally different topic, totally different thing for another day. But the main thing they were moaning about is that the graphics weren't up to indie standard. And, you know, I go around looking at lots of indie games, and the graphic quality really does, vary. It fluctuates from the sublime to the very few pixels, but just because they're very few pixels, I mean, some games are designed like that, they are very nicely made. And RPG Maker graphics are perfectly fine, quite frankly. And, people, while I love the small developers and the individuals as well, especially in making the games, I think from a point of view, there is, especially when you're making I know a zombie game's not really an RPG, but it was used in RPG Maker. There's too much of an emphasis there to have great graphics. It has to have amazing graphics. This is back onto my story versus graphics podcast, but the point still remains, is that people are putting far too much pressure on those sort of companies, on those sort of individuals as well, to have very good graphics. I mean, come on, if you've got a budget of nothing, you've managed to buy RPG Maker, and you've come up with this, what looks like an extremely interesting concept for a game. It really does. I would like to play the demo of it, just to see what it's like. There wasn't actually any demo link on the video, on the Greenlight, but if he does put one, I will play it, because it does seem like a very interesting concept. And no one's really giving him a chance. I mean, don't get me wrong, there would have to be some fundamental changes. There'd have to be sort of quite a heavy use of script, I would say, and I don't like to say it, there would need to be a new tile set, because for a zombie apocalypse, the RPG Maker graphics don't quite fit in. They're not quite gritty enough, I would say. So you do have those. There's really small niggly problems. I mean, then if you can get it down on there, and it's got a good story to it, and it's a zombie survival and all that good stuff, then you can change those tiles set later. You can change those graphics later. But people aren't willing to look beyond that with indie games. And you got to remember that a lot of the sort of small developers as well have made their own graphics. I know there's one in particular which I won't mention, but they've had to they even borrowed some textures from another game company to use in theirs just to show it off and how it would work. And then of course they were like, oh, it's amazing graphics, but obviously not many people realised that they'd borrowed some of the textures from elsewhere. But the fact that the game actually played very well and had a very, I'd say, safe battle system, but there's nothing wrong with a safe battle system. If it's tried and tested and works, and you put your own little spin on it, then that's great. And that's the sort of thing we get from these small developers, is you get these little bits that are amazing. or that can be amazing, can be revolutionary. And then they get developed by that game, and people like that game for that aspect. But I have a worry that we're going to see big gaming companies either take over the small team developers, which is probably what they deserve, but then make it more, I hate to use the word mainstream because there's nothing wrong with mainstream really, but cater to everyone, which is the problem that RPGs have gone down. They now must cater to everybody. It seems difficult that you can have an RPG which is aimed at just that particular section of fans. Obviously because of the mass appeal now of first-person shooters, which isn't a bad thing. Just, that's not how I like my games, and probably not how many people who do actually watch my videos think as well. So RPG fans aren't really being catered to enough, which is why these small developers, I think there's enough scope in these small developers to actually, I know I set out my quest to make my own game, to save RPGs, or to have one last hurrah maybe, which I am still planning on doing, I am still doing very slowly. But it's really encouraging to see that there are other game companies out there that are going with it. And it's like I've said before in other videos, and I'll say it again, it is because there is that gap in the market. Big game developers have left it open, and they've alienated much of the RPG fan base, so they don't really have anywhere else to turn. And now you've got all these small development teams making very interesting and unique titles. Obviously they're always going to have elements of a Final Fantasy, and or a Baldur's Gate or a Diablo. I mean, look at Torchlight too. That's an amazing game from what I've seen. I will be doing some videos on that actually at some point, so I'm looking forward to that. There's some really nice mods for that as well, so, and I will be making many comparisons to Diablo 3 because that I never played Diablo 1 or 2, but I didn't like Diablo 3 as much. I much preferred Baldur's Gate, if I'm honest. But we don't get any more of them anymore, which is a shame. Another RPG franchise that we don't have. But nevertheless, there will be other things to take this place, and we're seeing it now. We've got, obviously, as I mentioned, we have Torchlight. There's a couple of other very interesting titles that are coming out. There's a couple I've seen which are very much akin to the old style of Final Fantasy. They actually are a very sort of, they're very much positioned in the middle ground between being, I would say, a Final Fantasy 8 and an RPG maker. So sort of like in between the two. And it does look really nice. It's turn-based, obviously. Side-on view as well, which is very nice. Obviously the graphics, not quite. I mean, I would like to see a game like that done in Final Fantasy 8, Final Fantasy 9-esque style graphics. So, not amazing, but, a step up. You think about it in terms of that Evoland, that sort of thing, I guess, maybe a little bit better. And obviously with far more magic and attacks and stuff, because otherwise you're just going to heal and use magic and attack, which I know is pretty much what you do, but anyway, I'm getting confused by that. There's just not enough variation, there's not enough difficulty in the battles either, because at the end of the day the battles is going to be a big part of it, a big part of the games. So yeah, that's just stuff to look out for in the upcoming future. I'm not sure when they'll be up, when these different things will be up, or how regular they'll be at all, but it is something that I'm actively pursuing and actively in talks with. And obviously it is to gain awareness for their games, and they are, always worth checking out. Not everything is going to be your cup of tea if you're watching, and not everything is going to be strictly RPG. I'm trying to keep it as close to as possible, but if you see it, sometimes you'll see a title, no matter what the genre is, and you'll just want to know more about it. You'll just want to be able to get your hands on it and play a bit of it, whether it's in pre-alpha or not. And that's the thing, I play lots of games that are in various stages of their development, and I've yet to follow a game all the way through. probably because I've only started in November, and obviously playing Kenshi when it was version 0.3, playing Interstellar Marines when it was still in the web browser. There's a lot more space for development on those games as they are, and as they do develop more. For example, I've pre-ordered early access in Stellar Marines. I haven't done so with Kenshi. I'm waiting for another update, so I know there's been a lot of changes, but I want there to be a definite marked improvement, and it is getting there. I do follow it, and that's one of the games I would love to do an interview on, but we'll have to see. I can't say any more. I can't give anything away at the minute. You'll know when they come out. And there'll be various lengths as well. And the great thing about it is that if you have a game which you'd like me to try and do an interview on, or you have a specific question about a game, then I can try. Especially afterwards, after I've done the interview, then I'll still be able to have those connections there. If there's a question that needs answering, I can get it answered. Most of the time, my questions are obviously going to be very RPG related. I'm very much a nostalgic kind of guy, so I like to know what ideas have come from, where they've manifested themselves from, what's inspired people to do stuff. That is really where I gain the most interest from, learning about a project. And normally you find when people are promoting their project, they generally don't talk about it too much. They don't talk about what inspires them. They talk about the game as it is. I mean, obviously sometimes you can gather the stuff from that description. You can gather where it's come from. You can gather by playing the game where it's come from. But I mean, there's stuff for example, when I'm planning my story, there's stuff which you wouldn't think would be related. As you probably know, there's the video of the review in which I actually gave the reviewer some inside information, some extra stuff regarding what obviously inspired me to write certain parts of the story, for example. Obviously, that's always subject to change, but nevertheless, they're always influencing factors on the game. So, I've sort of gone off on many tangents. But basically, what I was trying to encompass in this podcast was the importance that I think small development games are going to play, especially on platforms like Steam, and whether they get taken onto consoles or not, I don't really think I can see happening, because personally I think there's going to be more of a swing over to PC gaming, especially especially during the next generation. Just because you can, I mean, I've done it, you can build a very, very good computer I can do my recording most of the time on full settings on the games, for £100 more than it's going to cost you to buy a console. And a computer is far more useful. Don't get me wrong, it's not quite as living room friendly, which you can understand, but with Steam big picture and stuff like that, I don't know. I see a definite change over to PC, if I'm honest. So, indie games have got that going for them. It's just what support they can get, because every single project, near enough, needs that extra funding, and that's where the difficulty is going to come in. There's going to be more. It is going to only get more rigorous. The indie games are only going to have to be that slightly bit better. That much better, sorry. And we'll also start seeing different development teams from big companies making small development team games, and that will really annoy me, because especially with what Square Enix were talking about, saying we'll make the next Tomb Raider if you fund us £5 million on Kickstarter or something. It's just an absolute joke. As soon as that sort of stuff starts happening, that's when the credibility of indie games is going to drop. Of small development games will drop. So, hopefully that won't happen. Hopefully it won't be allowed to happen, because personally I'm hoping the community will say, no, you're a big company, you go and fund it, because if you don't believe in it, then what's the point in saying to us, oh, we'll make it if you fund it? Well, don't get me wrong, there's some situation where that would work. For example, a Final Fantasy VII remake would probably work that way. I'm sure you could drum up a huge amount of money to remake that. But generally, I just don't think it will. Because at the end of the day, if those big companies who can put the risk, can put the money on the line to build the games, and build it to a higher quality as well, because obviously the money and the technology and the expertise, then they need to stick their necks out and do it. And take the risk. I mean, if you don't think that small development teams are taking the risk, then you're wrong. They put a lot of time and effort into it, and they have no guarantee of any reward. Not that big companies do, but obviously they have marketing, so you're going to sell some, but small teams have no guarantee of that. They don't know if, I mean, especially ones which are, mainly paid on performance. You're going to get, their jobs will hinge on the balance of that game. I know that's similar in some game companies and some development teams, but I think it is definitely more prominent in smaller ones. And there's just so much more on the line. But then that's what makes... It's out of that stuff that that breeds new systems, new terms, new ideas into gaming. So I think we're definitely coming into the age of small development teams, and I personally think it will only help gaming, and especially if the games can be brought over to, PlayStation 3 and Xbox, if they're good enough and if they're obviously of the right sort of play style, so you can use a controller with it and stuff. Then yeah, I don't see the problem with it. The only small thing I do have is that there's been quite a few games that have slipped through the gaps. Rubbish indie games. And that's the problem I have. That's the only really negative point I have. But as time goes on, that they're going to become much less and less, because the bar is raised every time you see the next Interstellar Marines. Every time you check on the Kenshis, you do see the bar being raised every time. And it's not going to be good enough just to have a decent idea. You are going to have some sort of team and need some sort of funding behind you. No, it's a bad thing. It means that the games will get done right. So I'd look forward to it. That's all I'm going to say. I look forward to it, and I hope that there'll be lots more RPGs for me to be able to review and love and enjoy and share with you guys as well, because at the end of the day, that's what I've done my channel for. I'd love it to one day be a shrine to RPGs and be the place where people go if they want to know about an RPG, if they want to know the latest news about RPGs. That is my dream for this channel, basically. So I've gone all the way off topic and all the way back on again. So I'm going to end it there. But I hope you enjoyed this. I presume it's been fairly long. I don't even know anymore. It's been a while, the podcast. And you'll have to join me on the next one, which might not be for a while, because obviously I probably have some interviews and stuff coming up, hopefully. And yeah, so keep an eye out for them. And if you want to, because you want to see that sort of stuff, then please do subscribe. There's no pressure to do so. But if you do want to be informed about them, please do. Or follow me on Twitter, because all my latest videos that go up get posted on there as well. So I don't use it, but hey ho. So thank you very much for watching, everybody. And I will see you next time. Goodbye.